Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Whole Self series, where we've been talking about mental health from a Christian perspective. Today's the last video for this series, and today we're going to be talking about the conversation of forgiveness. Now, we know we talked about forgiveness with Pastor Tim a couple weeks ago on a Sunday morning, but I just kind of want to focus a little bit more on this idea of forgiveness when it comes to the fact that forgiveness is healing. And so when we're talking about mental health, when we are talking about healing for mental health, we have to start with this idea of forgiveness and how that ties in to the overall healing process. Now, the first things first is that forgiveness is a journey. Forgiveness is a journey, it's not a destination. It's not the end all be all, and it is one part of this process of healing. It's a process, it's a continuation, it's a journey. It's not a single moment, it's not just a I forgive you and that's it. Forgiveness will not take away our pain, it won't take away the trauma, and believing that it's a cure for our hurt will only make us hurt more. That's the number one thing that confuses people about forgiveness and trips us up. Forgiveness does not automatically take away what we've been through. It doesn't take away our hurt. It doesn't take away our pain, but it is a process that we have to go to get from that pain to healing. And so when we're talking about healing, we have to talk about forgiveness in this process, because otherwise we're limiting what we can do with healing. We're limiting how we can get better. We're limiting what God can do to make us healed, to make us better, to make us who we're called to be. Forgiveness is a part of our faith because faith comes in moments of doubt, and forgiveness is forged out of pain. The most courageous faith does not believe solely to claim a miracle that is absent, but instead trusts God in order to endure a hardship that is present. The reason forgiveness is a part of this healing process is because it's not just about forgiving people. It's about enduring what we've been through, getting out of that and into something better. And the only way to get out of our pain is to acknowledge the pain, acknowledge how that pain came about, and to let it go, let it flow past us, let it be something that happened in our past, not something that's standing in our way of our future. Our pain is not an obstacle. Our pain is a foundation. And forgiveness is how we take it from an obstacle to a foundation. It's how we get from point A to point B. It's the process, not point B itself. Enduring such pain starts by accepting that pain and going on this journey of forgiveness. Forgiveness is both a decision and a process. Just like salvation is a lifetime of individual moments. If any of you were in the class we took last fall called The Invitation, you'll remember that we talked about, when we talk about holiness, that there's a distinct moment in all of our lives where we have chosen to follow God, where we've decided in that one moment to do something. But that holiness doesn't stop at that point. It's a constant deciding to follow God from that one moment, continuing with moment after moment after moment for the rest of our lives. And forgiveness is the same process. It happens just the same way. Yes, there is a moment where we're able to say, I forgive you, or I forgive what they've done. It doesn't take away that pain, and saying it once is never enough. It's getting up every single day and saying, I forgive them for what they've done. I've forgiven them for what they've done. I forgive them for what they've done. To keep going and to build up those moments, to make it a process, because healing is something that happens over time. It's not something that's instantaneous. We get a wound and we have a scab for a while. We've got a scar that lasts a long time as a reminder of what has happened. Forgiveness is a constant thing because healing requires it to happen over and over again. It requires us to build up the layers to protect us from that healing, to protect us from the pain, and to give us something to move us forward. Forgiveness is hard won that we have the opportunity to participate in every single day. It's something that takes a lot from us, but gives us so much more than what it takes. It's about surrendering to God, not because we enjoy the pain. It's not, feeling that pain and saying, I'm going to give it to God because that pain doesn't matter. It's because we're choosing to trust God with that pain, despite what that pain is doing to us. Trusting God anyways. Forgiving what has happened because God says forgive. Because God has forgiven us for what we've done. It's living with that pain all the time, but acknowledging that that pain does not end everything. Just because we feel pain doesn't mean it's the end. Pain is something we have to endure. Pain is something that pushes us forward. It doesn't stop us in our tracks. Forgiveness received and given is something that's done between you and God. Forgiveness isn't about, what you do with the other person. That's more reconciliation, like we talked about with Pastor Tim. Forgiveness is admitting to God that what another person has done or what has happened isn't standing in the way of the relationship that we have with God. Someone traumatizing you, hurting you, causing pain to you can sometimes be an obstacle between us getting to God. It can stop us from, living life to fulfilling our calling. And forgiveness is how we take it out of that way between us and God, admitting to God that it's not more important than my relationship with God, that my pain is not more real than God is to me. Forgiveness is about reshaping that pain into something usable, something fantastic and beautiful and better. It's the first step on this continuing journey towards God and towards healing. It's the process. It's simply by saying, I'm willing to be on this journey towards God. That's what forgiveness is about. That's why it leads to healing. Because it's saying, I'm willing to be healed. I'm willing to take the time to get better. See, when we talk about trauma and we talk about pain, we can't get rid of that. It's a fact of life. We can't edit reality to try and force healing. We can't fake ourselves into being okay with what's happened. We can't just forget all the things that have happened to us in our past. And we're not meant to just forget them. They shape us, they form us, they give us something to stand on. They make us who we are if we come out of them stronger and better. Forgiveness and healing takes time. It's not something that can be faked, not something that can be forced. No, forgiveness does not mean that trust is immediately restored. Forgiveness does not mean that, our relationships and those dynamics are instantly fixed. Forgiveness does not wipe away everything that's happened. Forgiveness is being willing to start again, to rebuild a new connection between us and other people, or us and God, and us and whoever or whatever it is that's caused a divide in between us. Forgiveness is about saying, no, we can't remake what was already there. That's been destroyed, that's been crushed. But it's saying, I'm willing to make something new that might be stronger, that might be better, that might take us somewhere we didn't even think we could possibly go, that is even more so towards our calling, towards healing, towards God. See, we have to be able to admit that there are things in our lives that cause real trauma, real pain. We talked about mental health. We talked about those ACEs. That there are real things in our lives that cause severe damage to our bodies, to our minds, to our spirits that we don't always even see that are there. But we see the effects of them. We see what comes as a result of that trauma, that pain, even if we can't remember what that trauma or pain is. There are real things in our lives that hurt us, that break us. And forgiveness doesn't mean that we have to forget that pain. It doesn't even mean that we are capable of forgetting that pain, because that pain is a part of us. That pain is a part of our past, a part of our journey, our process. Forgiveness brings freedom within that pain. Not despite that pain, not, instead of that pain. It's built within that pain. It's forged by that pain. Because letting go of our control over it, over that trauma, over that pain, means believing that God can work through it. Sometimes our minds forget the trauma that we've had, forget the pain that's been caused onto us. It's trying to forget those things because those things caused us pain. But our bodies are always remembering it. Our bodies remember pain that we don't remember, that our minds can't remember. And it's not about forgetting that pain. It's about giving it over to God and saying, I know you can use this. I know that you can make something beautiful out of it. So that when I get to the end of my journey, I can look back and say, that was something that got me from down here to up here. It's a part of the journey. It's necessary to build us up. And forgiveness is a part of getting it to move upwards, to move forwards, to use that pain. Trauma shatters us. It reshapes us into something that no longer fits anymore. It breaks us down into practically nothing. And it can make forgiveness feel like it's unrealistic, like it's a fantasy, like it's a dream, like it's not a real possibility because we're so broken in those moments. But being shaped, being molded, that's a part of the journey that we're on. It's a part of how God designed us to be. God molds us, God shapes us, God forges us in fire to make us stronger, to make us better. Being called to whatever it is God's calling us, being called to his church, being called to his mission, being called to his service, means being willing to let life forge something in us, to strengthen us, to build us up. And to build us up, we have to endure the things that break us down. But forgiveness is the process of taking what's broken and mending it back together. Taking what's broken and turning it into something beautiful. While salvation is what brings the flesh of a human into perfect alignment with the Spirit of God, forgiveness is the greatest evidence that the truth of God lives in us. Being able to forgive means that God is truly a part of us, that his Spirit truly lives in us and is working within us. And out of that forgiveness, we can see salvation happening. But that all comes out of this process of forgiveness. Learning to live with our pain, acknowledging it as real, makes healing a possibility. When we think about our trauma, when we think about our mental health problems, our anxiety, our depression, our pain and suffering, healing doesn't seem possible in those moments. It only seems possible when we're willing to forgive whatever caused those pains and sufferings. Healing only seems possible when we turn around and see the healing process that started already. When you get a physical wound, you don't think it's ever going to heal until you look down and see that healing has already started. It's the same thing with internal wounds. Healing only becomes a possibility when we're willing to put in an effort to make it a possibility. Our ability to heal cannot be conditional on others wanting our forgiveness. It's only on our willingness to give it. This is why it's a process between you and God. It doesn't matter the other people that are involved. That's a whole nother process. That's reconciliation. That's something more. That's something else. That's something different. Forgiveness is simply when we're ready to say, I'm willing to forgive. I'm willing to build up. I'm willing to stand up. I'm willing to put these broken pieces back together. I'm willing to start this process towards healing, towards God, towards reconciliation. It's something that you have to do. And it's something that you have to understand that it doesn't matter what the other people are willing to do. If you're willing to heal, then you have to be willing to forgive. Our pain does not have to be validated or vindicated by anyone else. Only recognized in ourselves, by ourselves, so that it can be set in the right direction, so that we can be set on the right path towards healing. Forgiveness is always healing in the right direction. There is no wrong way that can take us. When we're willing to be forgiven or when we're willing to forgive, that is automatically going to set us on the right path towards God. And even if we don't know which way to turn, even if we're completely lost, if we're willing to start this journey, God's going to set us on the right path. That first step is going to be in the right direction. Because we're simply saying, I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to choose God over my pain, over my trauma, over my problems. And in any way that looks, no matter which way we're supposed to turn, regardless of whether or not we know what we're supposed to do, by focusing on God, by looking towards God, that automatically gives us the right direction where we can find hope and where we can find healing. And that instantly happens when we're willing to forgive. When we're willing to forgive, we're also willing to admit that suffering is not pointless. Your pain isn't pointless. It's not just some random thing that's happened to you. It's something terrible, yes, but it's something with a purpose. It's something that can be used for something better. It's something that can build us up. Getting broken down is an opportunity to be built back up and to be built stronger than ever before. Learning to forgive is what forges us in true strength. It's not pointless if we use it for something better. It's not worthless if we're willing to use it as a foundation, use it as a tool towards healing, towards holiness, towards God. We cannot change what we've experienced, but we can choose how those experiences change us. We can't forget the pain, but we can choose to use the pain. Real change cannot occur in our lives and in our relationships without our intention to start this process. If you're someone who's saying, I want to change, I want to be better, I want to get over this, but aren't willing to do anything to do that, nothing's ever going to happen. Change only changes us if we choose to be changed. That's why following God starts with a choice to follow God. Forgiveness is a choice to start this healing process, whether that process is spiritual, mental, physical, or a combination of all of them. It is our choice to start that process. See, forgiveness comes in 3 parts. When we're starting this process, there are 3 things we have to remember, that we have to choose to forgive in order to set on this path, in order to be healed, in order to grow in our faith and in our maturity. First, we have to learn to forgive others. See, real trauma caused by others leaves a mark that our bodies just can't forget. Even though, triggers of that trauma come over time, come time and time again, no matter what we've done to heal, they show up. We cannot heal from those types of wounds without at least being willing to forgive what's happened. If we start by seeing the people that have wronged us as God sees them, then we're choosing to see them as someone who's not just done wrong, but as someone who needs redemption, needs healing themselves, needs God in their lives. And when we're willing to see them as a person that God loves just as much as he loves us, forgives them just as much as he forgives us, then perhaps that's the first step in us saying, what they've done to us does not define who they are. It does not define who I am. I'm defined by being willing to let it go, to move on, to move and to build from that point. We also have to learn to forgive God. Pain is a fact of life because sin is a reality. Humans chose to sin. Humans choose to sin every day. And because of that, pain is something we all have to endure. We all have to live through. We all have to face at some point. It's not something that God deals us because God's just choosing to have a fun day with us. God's not sitting up there picking and choosing who gets the worst kind of pain. It's a fact of life. And blaming God for all of those problems doesn't get us anywhere. It keeps us in the same exact place, keeping us from moving, from growing, from changing. And though God does not always change our circumstances, even though he could, God is still faithful. God is still by our sides through all of that. He's still willing to walk next to us, even if he can't change what's happening to us. Or even if God just doesn't change what's happening to us. Being able to say to God, I understand why I'm going through this, is also a first step in healing. A first step in coming out of that pain, out of that trauma, simply by saying, okay, I understand this is a part of my life. This is something my life needs in order to get better. The last one is learning to forgive ourselves. Feeling shame for our problems or for what we've done only disconnects us from God and from other people. We talked about that a few weeks ago. We are not at fault for feeling out of place. We cannot continue to punish ourselves for our mental health status, our mental health problems. The things that we go through do not define us. They're not a stopping point. And seeing them as that cannot put us at fault either. The things that we've been through, it's okay to feel them. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to feel pain. It's okay to be sad and anxious if we're willing to come out of those moments and into something better. What's not okay is living the rest of our lives in those moments. And even being in those moments and coming out of those, we can't hold ourselves at fault for having been in those moments. Forgiveness brings biblical love to our lives. And we're called to love ourselves just as much as we're called to love others. Because God loves us. God sees us as something worthwhile, worth more than anything else. And just because we have felt that pain, been through that trauma, have sat through those negative emotions, does not mean we cannot get out of them. And once we're out of them, it does not mean that we are any less than we were before. We're not less in God's eyes because we've been through those things, because we've suffered. Suffering makes us stronger if we're willing to use that. And when we're willing to do something with them, that's this process of forgiveness. That's how forgiveness leads to healing. As I'm finishing up today, I just want to remind you that Pastor Tim did talk a lot about this a few weeks ago in a Sunday morning sermon that you can rewatch if you want to get a little bit more in depth into the biblical references of forgiveness to try to figure out some more about what the Bible says about forgiveness. And I highly encourage you to go back and watch that sermon and get a little bit more of an in-depth idea on that. I also wanted to end today by giving you a couple of more book recommendations for this kind of topic and for about some mental health topics, especially when it comes to the forgiveness and shame and coming out of those broken moments. So a couple of the book recommendations that I have starts with this one. This is Hope When Life Unravels, Finding God When It Hurts. This one talks a lot about, finding our way back to God when life brings us circumstances we can't control, like someone in our family getting sick or dying. And so this is a great book for just kind of focusing our minds more on how can we come out of the circumstances that we have no control over and how we can find our way back to God. Another book recommendation is this book called Daring Greatly by Dr. Brené Brown. A couple of weeks ago when I gave some recommendations, I recommended some of her TED Talk videos. And so this is a book that goes with those TED Talk videos that I think is just absolutely phenomenal. Talks a lot about, how we can come out of this, state of vulnerability and how we can use it to transform our lives for the better. And so it's a really great book just for getting an understanding of that concept. Another book that I recommend is one I just recently got and read and I think is fantastic for this conversation of forgiveness. And that is called Forgiving What You Can't Forget. It is a really great in-depth discussion on forgiveness, especially when it comes to this type of forgiveness that leads to healing but doesn't negate the kind of trauma that we've been through. And when we're talking about, mental health in a Christian perspective, the type of forgiveness that we're talking about is the type of forgiveness that we can't just forget. We can't just wipe away. It's the type of pain that we have to live with and the type of forgiveness that we have to endure through. So this is a phenomenal book that I recommend to get a better and more in-depth understanding of this type of forgiveness when it comes to mental health. Well, that's all that I have for you guys today. I'm really thankful that you guys were able to watch this with me. Feel free to check out some of these videos. You know, if you want to go back to them, they're going to be on our YouTube channel and on the app. And until next time, bye!